Okay. First, a question about this organization ICON that you are a part of. That leads this, gives this opportunity to come to another country for 2 years and to write. Actually, as you know, the last year's Nobel Prize winner, Svetlana Alexeyeva.
Yeah, she was part.
She was a part of this. She was before you.
Yeah.
Which one of you will be the first to win the Nobel Prize?
Hopefully, let's say me.
Could you say something about this ICON organization? Just a few words, one of you could say that.
Absolutely. I would say that ICON was my savior, to be honest, because back in a couple of years ago, almost 3 years ago, I just reached into this point where I just said to myself, Ahmed, you cannot be sustaining to live in the Middle East. And literally, I was about to take one of those death boats that could sail all the way from Libya all the way to Italy. And I even had a budget for that one, because all I wanted to do is guarantee myself a better life. It all came with a coincidence. Since I have been Googling like a Norwegian NGO, it's called NOAS. I have contacted them and explained my situation. They told me that we only help now people inside Norway. But then again, we have a Norwegian NGO that is concerned within people from the cultural scene or cultural environment who write, who are activists. So why don't you contact them? I contacted them by that time, and I have been filling out the information and giving out samples, and they asked me to verify my story and check for 2 people who I trusted the most so they can call. And it was outsourced into Penn International, who've been doing all the background investigation, etc. And from there, actually, I was just nominated into Skellefteå Commune. So I can say that ICON was my savior, because for now, I can see myself probably, I'm either dead somewhere in the Mediterranean, because I was so determined to get into Europe and just live a life that is stress-free at least, or where I can express my thoughts and emotions in a place where I'm not censored 24/7, or in a place where I don't have the internet IP changed 24/7 and using all these mask IP programs that can mask your identity. Horrible, yeah, that's a bad feeling.
Yes, of course, okay. And you also like ICON?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay. Babak, you said something when you were talking before that I understood that sexuality, that defines the truth of yourself. I wasn't quite understood what you mean about that. Could you say just a few words exactly what you mean, that sexuality defines the truth of yourself?
You know, the way I was thinking on it, I was influenced by the way Michel Foucault understand it, and he described that in modern period, or in after 17th century, we have new definition of sexuality, because in Elizabethan time, it seems to be to talk about sexuality is a prohibiting thing. And then after that, we started to talk about sexuality as if we are presenting our truth about ourselves and things like that. And right now, actually, we are in this domain, because when we say I am gay or I am lesbian, it seems that we are saying something truth about ourselves, which produce our way of living or identity or things like that. And
can I jump in?
yeah, of course, yeah.
Please.
Okay.
Jude?
I do have.
But I have critique about it.
Yeah, I do have an issue with that, because it automatically puts a label on people. And my idea of labels is that labels are for clothes and shoes and not for human beings. The reason why I said that is that there is a huge difference between sexuality and identity. And I think what you're trying to really quantify is really more to do with identity. And we did have a conversation earlier where we talked about the gay gaze that people have, or the homosexual gaze, in the sense that when you identify as LGBTI or gay person, the first thing that strikes a non-gay person is the sexual act itself, not so much of you being a writer, or you being a father, or you being an architect, or whatever. The first thing that comes to heterosexuals' mind is, when you define yourself as homosexual, is the physical act of sex itself, which is a huge problem. And I think that's one of the first things that we need to start to restructure how we talk about identity and sexuality as well. When somebody identifies as heterosexual or straight, the norm is you don't think about what they do in bed. The norm is to think about other things. Is he a father? Is he a good father? Is he a good employee? Is he a good employer? Is he this? Is he that? We don't automatically think of sexuality. So to use sexuality as a primal focus to define people and personality, I feel challenged by that.
I feel challenged too. I was describing the dominant view on identities, which is based, because, you know, first when they recognized homosexuality, it was Freud time, it was psychoanalysis,
Yes.
and then police, and then government, and then clinical system. So we are stigmatized by these institutions first.
Yeah.
And for example, psychoanalysis understand sexuality in a sense that it produces something about yourself, and your traumas or your memory is dependent on something which is unconscious, and unconsciousness is a sexual matter. And then we tried later to understand our truth through sexuality.
Yeah.
As you said, interesting thing. You said that heterosexual people, it's not about just bed, it's about social system, which is a heteronormative system.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk about homosexuality or any kind of desire, we should be able to define or practice a kind of ethics, or how we want to live, instead of what is my truth about sex, or what is my identity, or what is my what. But also our struggle should be in the way society define norms for us, which we call it heteronormativity.
Yeah.
And this is about social matters. And this is about the way we live, or the way people live.
Yeah,
and the way culture is produced. Look at the television, look at the cinema, look at the literature. All is dominated by heterosexual love, or things
but
like that.
that's also changing, which is a good thing. I think for me, like when you look at, in my novel I portrayed a child, I'm sure you've read, where a mother is afraid that her son exhibits effeminate tendencies. And because she had recently found out that somebody was gay, she's thinking, oh my God, my son might be gay. And the reason why I wrote that wasn't so much as to create a sort of stereotype of gay people as being effeminate, because I have seen, you do have gay people who are effeminate, gay people who are very masculine, or vice versa, and all of that, was the fact that I was trying to use the child to illustrate that when you're a kid, you don't think of sex, but rather what you define or what you exhibit is identity. You know, so first we own identity, and then as we become adults, we own our sexuality as well, because this is who we are, you know, basically. What society dictates is another issue, you know, because they say the majority. I was in a program in Nigeria once where we had a conversation like this, and one of the audience people said, and this was really telling of how people think. He said, even if you do exist in the society, you are nothing simply because we are the majority. So for him, it was a majority rule. And it was a very, to me, sexist statement as well, because that's the same way he would lord over his wife, because he would have the entitlement to feel that, after all, I was born a man, so I'm superior, you know, to you as a woman, you know, and those kind of conversations,
I just have something to add. Haven't you even noticed that, for example, like I'm talking from a Middle Eastern background, they always link gay people into such things, such horrible things. Actually, like a gay person should always be a pedophile, should always be obsessed with necrophilia, should always be someone who you can't trust, someone who's always tried to be a pervert, etc., etc. They always try to stigmatize you somehow in a way that, you know, they legitimize any violence that might come up in the future.
Yeah, but why do you think that is? I do believe it's you as a gay person or a gay man or gay woman or whatever need to own the narrative. Don't allow people to tell your own story, because that's what happens. They seize that narrative and tell it.
Exactly. But then what would you do like for tens or like hundreds of years? The society has been like this. I mean, you can't be changing anything of the society. So it's kind of like there has to be a massive education campaign, for example, in somewhere like in Saudi Arabia, for example, where you have to destigmatize.
Yeah, define education.
Well, education that is liberal and that is accepting to people.
Not everybody's gonna. I mean, when I say define, are you talking about education as in you go to class, or education as it reflects in culture?
Society education, like when it comes to media, when it comes to education, when it comes to focus upon such things, when it comes to discussions as well. That might change the public perception about such things, because in such places it's just terrible, terrible, terrible. Like, for example, for the next 10 years, for example, a place like in Dubai, it is super modern, it is ultra, you know, everything is like top notch. But then when it comes to rights, or like basic human rights, for example, like gay rights, it's kind of like they're lacking almost like 40 years behind Sweden, for example. So we have to have, you know, there is something that we're not understanding, or there is like a really bad component in it. And we have to analyze that. Yes.
Okay. Jude, I want to go to the book that you have written here.
Okay.
In this book, it's a woman that her husband comes out as being gay, and they have a child, and this woman, this wife, she is at the start she's ashamed of herself. She thinks she's a bad woman, and she feels very much shame. After a while, together with a friend, she meets other women that are living together in relationships with men that are gay. Yeah. And that means that she could identify herself with them in one way after a while. And also, at the end of the book, I believe, she is accepting herself, she's accepting her husband. Yeah. They are divorced, but there is a good friendship, I believe, and a full acceptance. Yeah. I just want you to comment. Do you believe this is a...
It was important to write her story, because many times we do forget that it's not just one person that's involved in a story like this, especially if a gay man who is living, as they would say in America, on the down low, and you get married to a woman, and if she finds out that you're gay, and I'm going to use the American stereotype again, she gets crazy angry, goes to the bedroom, gets a gun and shoots you, and let's say you don't die, but people that hear the story will say, oh, she's such a mean woman and she's wicked. But what I was trying to do was also to look at this woman and think, because some of the arguments that she had with her husband was to say, I wasn't a willing participant. You know, you signed me into this life that I had no control over. You know, and maybe if you told me I'm gay, I probably wouldn't marry you, or I probably would have married you. But the difference is, if I'd married you, it would be my choice. So you've taken away my choice. And then, of course, she's angry, she's frustrated, she's thinking, did I turn him gay? Was it that I wasn't good enough in bed, and that's why he's chasing boys? You know, so all those questions to come. So she is ashamed. She does question her own womanhood. And I thought it was nice not to demonize her so in such a way that people can't identify with who she was. And so she goes through, she's one of the characters that actually had a full growth in the novel, because she starts very angry,
Yes.
and then self-doubt, and then acceptance. No, I won't say too much of acceptance, but more of understanding, because at the end of the novel, when the husband asks, or the ex-husband still asks her, what do you think is gay or homosexuality? And her definition of homosexuality goes against everything that he believes. And when he tells her what he thinks or what he believes is his aspect of homosexuality, what does she say? I don't understand.
No, exactly. She don't understand. No.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I think that when it comes to the book, that is, as I feel it, very, very good written. What do you think is a truth in Nigeria and a truth in Sweden and a truth everywhere when it comes to homosexuality? Do you think it's something universal that you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's a very universal story, because like Ahmed, I'm well traveled. I've been traveling since I was a kid. I've lived in places like London. I've lived in places like the US, and I've had the opportunity, to dialogue and to meet with people of same-sex relationships and whatever, people who are gay in these cultures that actually are more accepting and protective of gay people. And the common theme is there's a strong sense of shame, when somebody identifies as gay, as when you're coming out. So it's a very difficult period for anybody. And it's still surprising that in countries like Sweden or in the West, you still have people, in spite of the laws that they have that protect them, who still are living a double life because they don't want people to know who they are. And that is something that I can relate to, because I see it every day in my culture. And I think that the greatest question for me would be, you have a law that protects you, but you still have a sense to hide, And it makes me think of, if the laws do change in Nigeria, are we going to have people like this who, in spite of the law being on their side, they still have that strong sense to hide, to pretend, to not exist? So that's the universality of the story. And it's not so long ago that Sweden were punishing people for being gay. It's less than 50 years.
Yes.
And America just signed the Same-Sex Marriage Act just last year. To cover the whole, So it's not that so long ago, So there's a lot of issues, and I do believe that he mentions education, but my broad sense of education is not just going to the class or manifestos for people to read, simply because some people switch off when you mention textbooks or academic papers. So my form of education would be, let's use what the young ones navigate to, which is the arts, music, film, literature, social media. These are the kind of things that we need to use to expose what being LGBTI is, and to remove that, held idea of sex. Because I think even in all cultures around the world, sex is a very private thing. Not so much as a taboo, but a very private thing. But unfortunately, mention homosexuality, and all people get to see is either two women in bed together or two men. So we need to change that narrative so that people don't default,
But then you have to notice something here, is that the art and music is mostly like banned. So how can you, mostly, let's say the internet, for example, they get it from the internet.
Yeah.
How can, as long as it's banned, how can they get access into these things, for example? Unless, from me, from my own perspective, I think a really good solution, I think it would start with politics, especially European politics, like here in Sweden. If people go to their MPs, and the MPs go to the foreign minister, for example, so she or he can push for a better LGBT-related agenda in developing countries, like in Uganda, for example.
I agree and disagree.
They can attack and solve the problem.
I agree and disagree. I agree in the sense that that's the right thing to do. But before you get to that point where you can call up your MP and say, let's fight for the rights of LGBT people in my society, in Ethiopia or wherever, you have to first create an enabling environment where it becomes easy for people to actually do that. You don't have an enabling environment. Once you identify as gay in your country, chances of you being thrown in jail or killed is there. So nobody's going to do that. So the first thing to do is to first create an environment that's enabling. And the only way you can do that is to break the stereotypes. And you use arts. You know?
Yes, I think also the culture is very important, the cultural way of theater and art and so on. If I speak as more than 60 years old and think about the Swedish experience, I believe that during the last 20 years we have had a few very official examples of homosexual people that are very well known in Sweden and that are very folkkära. Eva och Eva och Mark och Jonas. Sorry, I don't know the English name. And I think they have been very important to get an environment that is more accepting homosexuality.
That's key.
It's not only a law, I think that's important. Babak, we were talking before we started this, and you told us when you were presenting yourself that you had been stopped in being a PhD, stopped in university studies. And so. If I say that, I believe that you are a kind of a left-wing writer. Do you agree or do you disagree in that way of speaking?
Yeah, I do. I did read lots of left tradition books, and I wrote, and I was involved in some movements like student movement and feminist movement, and in those experiences I was more close to leftist activists.
Are you a political writer then?
No, no.
How could you say that?
You know, for example, I can say from my background, I was a student in university, and at that time, I mean 2007, society was in movement, and I as a young person was in that environment, and I started to write poetry and write fiction and write critical text. And in order to change something, or in order to be with my friend or produce new relation with my friends and, I don't know, express myself. But at that time, we really wanted to change something. And we were going to change it, but it didn't happen. But what I mean is that, you know, first of all, it was a personal thing, writing, for me. Of course, I was social, but I cannot say that any political demand or any social demand make me to write at the time that I started to write. But yeah, I was so involved in politics because I was a political living being. I was a political animal. So in that sense, yeah, I was political, and I was really interested in reading political science and like history of Marxism, liberalism, neoliberalism, colonialism, post-colonialism, things like that. And it really made my mind better, and I reflected both on myself and on my society. And what I wanted to add was that although my text was read by young people or students at that time, but I don't think that in order to change all life, I don't know, or personal life, or sexual life, or ethical life, we don't have to wait for the society to change. I mean, we have always this presupposition that we cannot change anything before we develop our economy. We should first develop our democracy and things like that. I don't believe in that. And I think something is toward the subject, and we can change ourselves, and we can work on ourselves and our relation to the others. And we can work and see how we are produced as a subject, as a white man, as a black man, as a homosexual. It's actually a history of being an injurious name. I mean,
Injurious name?
I mean the name that is on you, like I'm here right now as a gay writer. This is an injurious name. It means that I'm injured of my being gay. And this is how I understand myself as a gay. Yeah. In some parts, we should accept this injury and try to understand the collective sense of this injury, not just individual matters. And at the same time, yeah, we should go beyond such representation of all lives, or gay life, or lesbian life, or anything.
Isn't it easier to just say, I'm a writer who happens to also be gay? Because that's how I define myself. I think defining myself as a gay writer automatically it makes people just expect certain types of writing from you. And when you don't deliver, they feel disappointed. Like, why is he writing normal stuff? He's supposed to be writing only on gay issues. I've never allowed my sexuality to determine my personality or my self-worth, because I think, truthfully, that's a private thing. It's not something I always bring to the table. So, and I've had this conversation with you before, that the whole idea of the gay writer thing annoys me, it irks me. I'm like, ugh, that's not something I identify with. I identify as a writer, you know, and then, yes, I happen to be gay, but I identify as a writer. That's how I look at it, though. Yeah.
But this is what we are called. I mean, the government put pressure on us as that, and we carry on this name across the borders until we came to Sweden. We're still carrying on these kind of names, and it's interesting. In a way, I accept it, and I try to understand it in a collective way, not a personal thing.
But you want just to say, yes, I'm gay. So what?
Exactly. That's my ideology. So what? You know, I'm a writer. This is what I do. You know, I write. And
but Babak, you don't want to. It's not that easy for you, or what? It's not enough for you to say, yes, I'm gay. So what? You want
because I am nothing. I become. You know, I'm 32 years old, and I still feel the sense of becoming, and I'm waiting for new becoming. Because, you know, aging question is very important. You cannot be something, because as you are a living being, you always feel becoming, and you feel change in your life. So in that sense, I don't even feel human.
But Babak, I think there is a point here, is that we should...
you don't feel human.
That's an interesting perspective.
I mean, human is a very sad thing. It's the way we are produced, and
but
I guess it will be removed soon. Because
so why don't you take the narrative? That's why I keep saying, why do we allow people to define who we are? And why do we automatically want to accept this definition? Why can't we just be okay with saying, I'm a writer, I'm a this, I'm a that? My sexuality should never be a topic of discussion simply because it's a private thing.
But I guess it should
Ahmed,
be...
what do you say about
yeah, but actually, I think we should take this as a positivity thing, because, I mean, for me, I live in Skellefteå, northern Sweden. You live in Norrköping, which is in the middle, live in Malmö, which is in the south. So we kind of have to be somewhere of pioneers within the literature community, so that we can, in a matter of 10 years at least, we have people who will be, hopefully, will be continuing from where we started. And instead of just anybody's just starting from zero, no, we have people in a matter of 3, 5, 10 years, people like young people especially, who will be motivated and coming from the same backgrounds. Like for me, coming from Somalia, you're coming from Iran, you're coming from Nigeria. I hope we see more like people coming from different cultures who are stepping up to the challenge in different cities, so that they can discuss more and more and more about such things. Topic of homosexuality is new somehow. It's kind of like a lot of countries, like recently, they legislated this, as you said, the US, 2015, they legislated this. So it's kind of like a topic that faces a lot of criticism and a lot of backlash. But I think with time, things going to get more cooler. And for countries like in Somalia, for example, or like in Iran, or like in Saudi Arabia, thing is, for now, I see, well, I don't see any feasibility of it, of being legalized, but at least decriminalized, because it has harsh sentences. So the fact that if we just see it as being decriminalized, I think that can play a really important part in shaping the LGBT future in itself. So yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
Yes. I remind you about the possibility to have questions and comments. And Jude, you said that in Nigeria is a country with a very large country, 20 Sweden, you said.
Exactly.
And it's a country with a Christian tradition and a Muslim tradition.
Yes.
60-40, I think you said.
About, yeah.
Could you say something about what does that? That's a mixed country. What does that mean in the country? You said you traveled around, you could compare and so on.
First and foremost, I always look at Nigeria wasn't meant to be a cohesive country, because when you look at how countries or nations are shaped, it's people of common thinking, common language, common values that form a country. You know, basically, and that's the concept of what a country is. In Nigeria, we have, apart from the size of the people, we have over 500 languages, and half of those languages are not even connected in any sense. So I can use the major languages, Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa. There's nothing that connects them. Unlike when you have your Germanic language, so you have like English, French, German, and then you can find a single stem that connects these languages. We don't have that. And then when the country was formed, the major part of it in the north were Islam. You know, the Islamic religion was preached there. In the south, we had the Christians, and then a section of it also was the Muslims. What is sad about Nigeria, though, is, like I said earlier while I was doing my presentation, I think, this is just a theory, is when you are under suppression, dictatorship and suppression, you have to look for something for succor, for hope. And I think the default was religion. And so we've leaned so much on the teachings of all these religions and books that are so alien and foreign to our culture that we've forgotten who we were. And so it plays a role of how we treat ourselves. When people in Nigeria or Africa at large will tell you, this is so un-African, being gay is so un-African, it's against our tradition, and the Bible forbids it, the Quran even forbids it. And these are people talking about tradition and Bible and Quran in the same language. And you're thinking, but these two things you've mentioned that have nothing to do with our culture or tradition, they were imported. The role of of Christianity and Islam, the only time, and this is where I'm getting to, the only time they come together and agree on anything is when the topic of homosexuality is brought up. And I think that's very sad. That is the only time you can get the Christians and the Muslims to sit on the same table and agree, let's kill the gay people. And that's how it operates in Nigeria. Yeah.
Terrible. Just terrible. Yeah. Okay. Babak, I think Iran is the country where you are left just 2 years ago.
In 2013.
Yes, 3 years ago. What do you think about in Western medias? We have this agreement between Iran and United States, and they are mixed affairs together. They are handlar med varandra. They are trading with each other. What is your opinion? Is that very good? Will the country, will Iran be a good country, a nice country to live in the future?
It is a nice country, actually. What do you mean about LGBT people, or politically or economically?
I mean politically, and will it be possible to have freedom of speech and freedom of right and so on in the near future? What do you think?
Yeah. You know, some parts of if we talk politically, we can say that lots of things happened that made these two powers to negotiate to each other, or made Iranian government to be forced to negotiate to international government, because they need to be a part of international market or international politics. And in these 20 or 15 years, they actually did it well, because they followed the policies of International Bank, and the International Bank encouraged them very much in Ahmadinejad time. So economically, they will lead to join the international capitalism in future. And I think they have the opportunity of doing that. But about the alternative cultures, if you mean the writers or the artists who are writing in a different way or thinking in a different way, for them, no, the situation is getting worse, because actually they are getting arrested. The fact that I'm here, when they again started to put pressure on me, it was the new government after the election. When they won the election, they knew what is their plan for the future, and they chose some leftist or feminist or queer writers or activists and started to put pressure on them or arrest them. And at that time I escaped. I was in Turkey for a while to see if I can come back, but I found that they are arresting some of my friends who were actually in my magazine, they were writing. And also some other writers were arrested. So for the ones who want to join this cultural market, yes, it will be freedom of expression in future of Iran. Like, I don't know, but it's not freedom of expression, because some parts of power structure have, each of them has magazines or newspapers or publications. And some artists or writers, yes, they accept to, yeah, the situation is getting better, let's do artwork. But what are those artwork? They are conservative works of art, they are heteronormative works of art. And so in a sense that you call freedom of expression in Sweden, no, it's not the case. But I think they are imagining something like, you remember Turkey 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. They are imagining to become something like that. I mean, playing human rights games and also oppress, but because we are negotiating, America or Europe doesn't anymore tell us that why you are oppressing, because they are market with us. So
like Saudi Arabia and America, actually.
Yeah, like how was the situation in Saudi Arabia in these years? Yes. This is political sense of, about LGBT people, I can say no difference, because they are both parts of Islamic government and they don't believe in such things, or they don't want such things to appear in the society. But there are some difference I can imagine. For example, the difference between Nigeria and Iran. I guess, we have a kind of powerful middle class, and they're always demanding the government. Even if they are oppressed for some years, they will come back. And Iran, modern governments were always, they have bipolar politics about LGBT issues. When they, recently they call it as homosexual, and they have some law against it, but they named it after a couple of years. So the question of naming happened, even if it's against that. And the same happened in Europe in, 19th century. First they name it as a crime, or something. They arrest gay people. So, but when you say about the discourses, you can say they are naming it. So it is becoming something legal, I mean, prohibited legally. But what is freedom? Freedom is to make it legal. So it will be the case, and I'm not agree with none of them, this kind of definitions. And one other thing is that in Iran, if they say, in Nigeria they say that homosexuality is something Western, and it's a kind of, because colonialism has a huge history in Africa. So, but in Iran was not the same in modern periods. Iran didn't colonialized. So we have, in some parts, Islamic parts of government, they always say this is something Western, we don't have homosexuality in the society. But at the same time, you will see in the laws or recently in the conferences, they say something critical about homosexuality, but they name it correctly.
I know, but
and the people
does it have a name in your culture?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, I can say, for example, it's a very interesting question because before they called it hamjins baz, it means somebody who play some games with his same sex, just as a game, not as an identity or things like that. But recently they are trying to convince the government that no, we should say hamjins gara. It means something that I have desire to, and something that is defining my desire. So discursively, it is, it has two parts, and this is the difference between Nigeria, because I don't know, the government is violently oppressed, but we have a middle class or new generation who is trying to name it. So
well,
this kind of conflict is happening.
The naming is nothing can exist without a name within a society, and I can give you a good example. We don't grow apples in Nigeria. There's no local name for apple at all. However, there is in every single 500 language of Nigeria a word for homosexuality, which means this is something that must have existed and has come to terms now. So if it doesn't have a name, but if it has a name, that means they do recognize it. It has existed.
I guess they do recognize it, but to make it legal, I think it will take time because the situation in Middle East is very corrupted and everywhere is war. So society accepted that, oh, such thing is not our problem right now. We should first develop our economy, try to be safe in the war around us. And so comparing to 10 years ago, the situation of LGBT people is getting worse because the question is not on the table. The question of economy, the question of war, the question of working class, and lots of things.
Babak, haven't you noticed that too much religion is bad religion somehow? Because in countries where the church is responsible, it has so much involvement within the legislation itself, or when the Sharia has a lot of legislation in itself, it's kind of like the first people who will be affected. I mean, they are like LGBT people, especially the human rights in itself will be super poor. Like in places like in Uganda, for example, you have Ethiopia, for example. Ethiopia, the ruling legislation are influenced by Orthodox Christianity. Or in Saudi Arabia, for example, you have Sunni Islam, or in Iran, you have Shia Islam, for example. And it's kind of like when you have so much religious inside the legislation, that's the time when we have a problem. I think that the religious element should be taken out. That's the time when we can see improvement, by the way. But other than that, I mean, it's just a dead end.
Yes. Okay.
And can I say something?
Okay.
No, I can say later.
Okay.
It's a long discussion.
Okay. But I think that we come to a part now that I will give you the opportunity now to speak 3 minutes each to the audience, to your friends, and say something important as being on a scene in the country where you can speak whatever you want. 3 minutes free speech, each one of you.
I don't understand that. Say something regarding...
In mind, say something that you really, this I want to say. Because of the discussion, or because of anything else. And this will be the final of our evening, I believe. Who wants to start? 3 minutes. The world is yours.
To the lovely audience, how about if I give like a quick introduction about my upcoming book? It is called Haram, or Haram in Arabic, or translated into sinful in English language. It encompasses the lives of LGBT people coming from Muslim and Middle Eastern countries. And I think we have 2 minutes, so I should be reading super fast. But I hope you guys focus. So I'm going to start now. 3, 2, 1. In order not to be grumpy with life, we have to be realistic about when it helps us all the time to wash away all the sad memories and replace it with fresh, new, joyful memories, which feels like a breeze of fresh air in a hot summer day. My story revolves around a world that is as utopistic as it gets. I remember very well when I started to disattach myself from all the misery and drama that are associated when you come out as a gay person, defying rules of the society, the norms, your families, wishes, and God. And letting go all of this necessary agony, I started to hang out with a queer guy who's laid back, and we share lots of activities. And quite frankly, his company left up my morals so much, I kind of felt there is a sense of belonging with him more than anyone else. A lot of straight macho guys and other folks from our social circles used to happily show their disgust and prejudice to my bestie, as he was a bottom guy, but then again, they wouldn't mind to approach him just so they could empty up their load on him as long as they are under the radar. What a twisted, hypocritical society this is. But then again, everybody used to wonder how come this quiet, antisocial kid hangs out with this flamboyant fag. How did they link up? He's probably gay too. But to be honest, I didn't mind all these accusations, as I believed that we both have been alienated, and that would even make our gay bromance stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Babak, here comes your 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very glad to be here. And the subjects that right now I'm working on are, one of them is some thinking of queer hospitality, that I'm working on it. It's very hard, not so successful, but I enjoy it. And in this topic, queer hospitality, I'm trying to negotiate or think about the question of being a foreigner to a home, and the question of the host, and how we can perform hospitality in current situation, and how we can have a queer definition or conception of it. Because I think hospitality is, you cannot say hospitality when you invite someone. It's not hospitality. Hospitality is when you let in the unexpected guest, when you are not looking for, when you do not, where is he from, or you even do not, even if he is enemy or friend. So in this sense, I'm reading some books and researching on that, and I think I experienced it myself too as a writer in exile. So it's a definition of migration and sexuality with some looks on LGBT refugees, that I was in connection with them. And also I'm going to write some articles. I did some notes about them, and I'm going to complete them. For example, about history of gay films, queer art, and stuff like that. And also, we will collaborate with a friend about a film which we are going to make.
much work ahead of you. Okay.
Yeah, I did half of them, but I'm going to collect them or finish them.
Yes, very good. And finally, Jude, what do you want to say?
I'll keep mine pretty short. I'm working on some interesting projects. One is the film rights of my first novel has just been purchased, so I will be working with the filmmaker who's based in the UK, but hopefully the film will be shot in Nigeria. I'm also writing a new novel. I call this my European novel, because most of my work has really been focused on my country and the UK, because I travel and I lived in the two places. But now that I'm here, I'm writing a new novel based in predominantly here in Sweden. And I think the most interesting thing is it's forced me to become much more observant of the Swedes, because you hear a lot of stereotypes about Swedish people, especially when you're a foreigner coming in. Oh, the Swedes are very into themselves and quiet. Oh, this and all that. So I'm actually, when I sit in a bus now, I'm actually watching, listening to how they react to things. And for me, that's a great education on its own. But the theme of the book is very similar to what Babak has outlined, because mine also deals with migration. I came in last year, June, and soon after I came in, there was an explosion of Syrian immigrants coming into Europe, which even forced European governments to create borders, no longer an open border. You have to show your papers and all of that. And I was able to interact with a whole lot of other migrants that came in, and a lot of their stories were quite fascinating. And some of the racial tension that was caused by the influx of refugees into Europe was also something I felt at this time it's so relevant to tell these stories, and my way of bringing, to the light what's happening. It's not so much as education, but I always like to use art to reflect what's going on now, and not in a way that preaches, but in a way that allows people to actually see themselves as who they are. So yeah, the story really deals with the migrant issues and more or less the Swedish interactions with this. So I have characters who are predominantly Swedish and characters who come from different parts of the world, and the melting pot is Sweden. So the story's been told here, and so that's what I'm working on.
And with that, I will say thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to you, Ahmed, Babak, and Jude.
Do they have any questions?
Yes. Do you have any more questions? Do you have a question? Yeah? No? Okay. Everything is very clear, so thank you very much.
Okay.
And if you're interested in Jude's book, it's available for sale here, or in Akademibokhandeln. You can order it. You can borrow it at the library from next week. And both the publications of Babak and Ahmed is not available in Sweden, unfortunately. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.